last bit that we're going to talk about here is how software and copyright interact. So copyright allows us to copyright the idea, not the expression of an idea. So copyright allows us to capture the idea, not the expression, which allows it a lot of flexibility as well as a kind of broad application of intellectual property protection. But at the same time, it also doesn't necessarily provide precise protection, which means that when we make software, a lot of the software that we create is actually a shared concept in some regard. And now what I mean by that in terms of shared concept is a lot of software shares a lot of features, right? We have login information, we have forms that get collected, we have certain things about how we handle data in the background, we have databases, we have all kinds of features in our software that are reusable patterns, things that we expect to be able to do. So we're again, capturing the idea, not the expression with copyright. So when we're talking about copyrighting software, we can't copyright specific implementations or specific design decisions necessarily. We have to capture the overall concept of the software. Now that's also particularly hard because code is a lot like recipes. The code behind it is more like a recipe in terms of a trade secret than it is about the actual idea being expressed. So you're copyrighting the overall idea and goal of the software rather than a particular thing. But again, we can reverse engineer copyrighted work and create our own, and that's legal. So that's something that's actually really easy to do with software. Now, the other thing is that we have a lot of accidental violations. So an accidental copyright violation is essentially when you take knowledge from a previous work that you've worked on or a previous thing that you have experience with, and you accidentally reuse portions of it. So this actually happens a lot in the music industry. This is a good example where someone hears a song and the song's good, it's popular, people like it. It doesn't even necessarily have to be popular, but the particular person, it sits with them. And over years, right, you forget where you heard a particular tune. Maybe you forget that you even heard it somewhere else at all. And it becomes something you kind of just know, and maybe you decide to use it in another song that you write yourself. This is accidental copyright violation. It is still a violation, and you're still held legally liable for that copyright violation. However, it's not something we necessarily intentionally do all the time, and this can happen a lot in software as well, particularly if we're doing that reverse engineering scenario. And you can read more about how that can interact in your textbook, but it's important to remember that this can happen. And we have some solutions to dealing with this, and that starts with open source software, or OSS. Open source software is basically software that's meant to be stolen in some regards. It's software and design of software that is out in the public and meant to be shared with others. You can add on to it, you can change it, you can use it for commercial purposes, you can use it for free purposes, as long as you're abiding by certain copyright protections that are on it, which is usually something like the GNU license or other free open source license agreements that can be included on such software. You'll find a lot of these happen to have their repositories, their projects available on GitHub, which allows you to go and look at their source code. You can see how it gets built and how you can run it yourself. You can also, of course, modify or add on to that project in some way. So there's a lot of opportunity with open source software to address some of the issues regarding software and copyright in terms of sharing of ideas and concepts of code. And it's becoming more and more common for even industry professionals to rely on open source software or even contribute back to that open source software based off of industry needs. The next thing is Creative Commons. So Creative Commons includes a lot of things. It includes things such as pictures, it includes things such as text, it includes artwork. All kinds of material can be found in Creative Commons and is being used more and more often. In fact, on some of the slides that we used way at the beginning of this course, there's some artwork that I used that was Creative Commons based, so I didn't even have to attribute where I found it from. Uh, you'll find that this is also becoming more and more common for people to contribute to create, and to use as we move into this information technology age, because it is very hard for us, even with DRM and DMCA, to abide by and to protect copyright protections on a variety of type of media, regardless of whether or not it's software or if it's an MP3 or a video. It's really hard to protect these things in a way that still allows people to use them in this free use aspect that we talked about earlier, but also protects the owner so they can make a profit or otherwise benefit from their creations. So that's about all we're going to talk about regarding this particular chapter. Make sure you're reading. I do recommend, again, watching that playlist that I linked in iLearn. It's really useful for going over the particular things that I did not talk about, which is what exactly each type of protection is, what it covers. You do have a quiz on this chapter, so make sure you read the whole chapter and then take that quiz.